Hello, I would like to teach just a sample lesson to kind of know how class would be and to kind of give you a little look behind the curtain of, where all the lessons are housed and just kind of let you know how the class operates. So just want to show you that I can pretty easily share screen, of course, on Zoom and just look at a couple typical little SSAT problems that we would face. All right. So this is, I think one of my favorite little SSAT problems because I know that a fifth grader could get this problem right, but not every fifth grader would get it right. I say this because this question just requires you to add, subtract, divide, multiply. It's just a basic, arithmetic kind of problem, but you have to really think about it. All right. The mass required to trigger a mousetrap is 157 grams. What is the largest piece of cheese? What is the largest piece of cheese that a 4-ounce mouse could carry off, could carry away from the mousetrap and not set off the mousetrap, right? And then they tell you that 1 ounce is 28 grams. So then, of course, like the first thing you want to do is convert a 4-ounce mouse to grams. So here's our little mouse, you know, all right, it's a 4-ounce mouse and he's going up to the mouse trap. And we want to know, what's the biggest piece of cheese we can put on the mouse trap and not kill the mouse, right? Anyway, so the first thing you're going to do is convert ounces to grams. So we're going to take 28 and multiply by the 4 ounces, right? We're going to get 112 grams. So it's a 112 gram mouse. And then really, you're going to take 157 grams, which is well, typically you could just take 157 grams and subtract the 112 grams. And of course, you're going to get 45 grams. But the key to this whole problem is that if you put 45 grams as your answer, 45 grams is going to equal the dead mouse. All right. So you have to pick 44 grams. That's why I always call it like a thinking man's problem, a thinking woman's problem, right? We don't want to pick the 45 grams because that would be the dead mouse. Yeah, they got to pick the 44 grams. So this is just that extra step of thinking about it to get you across the finish line. Now, the other strategy I've also heard is use 156 grams here, use 156 grams there and then subtract your 112 grams from the mouse. That would get you there too. But either way, you have to stop and pause and think about it. Like, I don't want this mouse to die. So what is the largest piece of cheese that a mouse could carry off and not set off the mouse trap? That's the key, I think, to the problem. So just showing you that I can write on the screen, that I can highlight, that I can draw mice and draw mouse traps as best I can. All right, and then I just want to show you maybe some typical verbal problems. So, I mean, these are relatively easy verbal problems, but you still have to think about it a little bit. So these are just the first 8 problems on kind of an older practice test. And some of these words you might recognize. I think the key to these SSAT synonym problems is to put things into sentences, put them into short sentences. When you collaborate, you work together, right? So I collaborated with her on a project. I worked together. He suffers from a strange ailment, a strange illness, right? Now, 3 is a good one because I don't know, a memento is something that you might buy to remember your trip. I got this memento of Paris. You go to Paris and you get a little statue of the Eiffel Tower or something. Not really my best drawing of the Eiffel Tower, but I got this little statue of the little figurine of the Eiffel Tower to as a memento of my trip, right? And, the answer, of course, would be souvenir. But there's little attractors in here, like badge. Like if you go to the famous prison in San Francisco or outside of San Francisco, Alcatraz, you might get a little badge. But that's just an attractor, right? We want to avoid the attractors. To jeopardize, smoking will really jeopardize your health. Yeah, and then you're getting it down to like B or C, smoking could threaten your health. Or what's the better answer between B or C? Endanger? Yeah. Don't jeopardize your future. It's not like you're threatening your future. Like, don't jeopardize your future. Don't endanger your future. Don't put yourself in danger. Don't jeopardize your health. And threaten's close, right? That's like a close attractor, I think. A fiasco is a total failure. Like, just kind of maybe got to know that word or have heard that word. Hard to put in a sentence if you don't know it. Colossal, it's a colossal building, a colossal mistake. I just get the idea that it's kind of big or huge. Flamboyant's kind of a common SSAT word. If you're flamboyant on stage, that actor's really, it's a great actor, but he's a little maybe too flamboyant, a little too overly acting, a little too showing off, a little too showy. And then, something like empathy. Empathy is different than sympathy, right? And I might have, yeah. And then like during class, I'll like do good little screenshots like this. Sympathy is, I kind of think of that S. Sympathy, you sort of see that somebody's in trouble. I have sympathy for you. I understand that I see that you're going through a hard time. Empathy is when you really feel another person's pain. Like sympathy is just sort of acknowledging it. Like I acknowledge your pain. Empathy is like, oh man, I can feel your pain. So in some ways, empathy is greater than sympathy, right? So I don't really want to go with just B because they're not exactly synonyms. They're close, and I'd understand why a student would pick B, sympathy. But the better one, and pathos is a good one too. Like pathos is kind of that same root word, but I think you got to go with understanding. I have total understanding because I'm feeling the pain that you have. I have a similar personal experience that I can relate to. So that's kind of a tricky one. And there's definitely attractors there. So that's kind of how class will work. I'll have screenshots for you. I will go through sample problems. I'll be able to write on the screen. Of course, I'm going to ask you to write on the screen. I mean, right, yeah, actually, you can write there. I can actually share the screenwriting tool, but I'm going to ask you to maybe do some work at your desk and then we'll grade it, or we'll go over page, 16 in the book. Then I'll be able to share I will be able to share the exact same textbook together. And we work like that, of course, a lot. And then I just wanted to show you kind of behind the curtain a little bit of what the class kind of looks like. So I want to show you, hold on for a second. All right. I just want to show you what the class kind of looks like behind the curtain, if you will. So this would just be a typical class. This is the fall online course, session 1. I just want to show you like how it works behind the curtain, if you will. So this would just be like the welcome video. Here's the Zoom link for every class, although I do email the Zoom link out before class. The Zoom link for every class, and then links to the practice tests. I give you access to 3 full practice tests. After each class, I will, post the recording pretty much immediately after class. So if you miss class, you got to watch the recording, kind of at your earliest convenience. But the class, this is last year's first class, and it's right there, all right, for you to watch. And then, of course, you can make this, full screen and on your computer just to go back. And then just to call your preview mode, sorry, preview mode. This is kind of what the student sees. So those are all the classes from the fall. We've had 16 classes. I usually promise at least 10, but we usually get 12 to 16 classes in. Then the course is broken out in topics. So introductory topics are in section 3, math topics are section 4. And then what I try to do is have these enrichment videos. I try to make them relatively short. This one's kind of long. It's 29 minutes. This one, the 10 most common SSAT math problems, is 24 minutes. So these are sort of bonus enrichment videos, the 10 most common SSAT math problems. And these are not part of the Zooms, although I refer to them sometimes in the Zooms. But these are just kind of what I think of like our enrichment videos that are worth watching on the side when you get time. And then the last section sort of is the quizzes, which is important. The quizzes section is you would go here and you would study this Quizlet first. Take this quiz after you study this Quizlet. So you study the orange cards 1 through 10. That'll bring you outside of my website to Quizlet. And you would study this word, elaborate, which actually could be pronounced 2 different ways. That's an elaborate plan, or as a verb, could you elaborate, right? So I try to explain that, as a verb, it means to explain in greater detail, but as an adjective, it means complex, detailed, intricate. And then, when you amplify something, you make it louder or make it bigger, right? Anyway, so then what you would do is you would study this Quizlet and then you would come back, you would come back and you would take this quiz. When you abridge something, you make it shorter And you're gonna find out whether you're right away. If you're adamant about something, you are very fixed. You have a fixed mindset. You're firm. You are C, inflexible. All right. If you're adroit, you're skillful. Anyway, so that's kind of like the nuts and bolts of the class, the quizzes section, the writing section, the reading section, the verbal section, the math section, the introductory section, all the classes posted. And then I'll be building even more stuff this year. This is just kind of last year. So that is a little preview of how the SSAT class works. And then if you're considering the online or in-person course, the in-person kids have access to the same exact things that the online kids have access to. So the classes really work well in person and online, I think. And obviously in person is nice, but if you can't be in person, I think you get a great experience by being online. All right. Thank you so much for taking the preview.